we so drawn to stories? Stories and books. Beginning with the Odyssey and the Iliad and Beowulf, the Bible, the foundational myth. Stories and movies where the main character goes through trials and tribulations, which actually help them to develop their character. Stories and video games where we feel like we're that main character, yet all of the action happens on the screen. The stories that we tell one another as interpretation of our lives. The stories that we omit to tell one another because they make our characters too vulnerable or do not present it in the best kind of light. If you could perceive your own life more as a story, and you could detach from it a little bit, and truly be honest about all the details, that story can shift and rearrange like pieces in a kaleidoscope if you look at it from a new perspective. Because no story is stagnant, for there are always many viewpoints. Through which to look at it. Alright. It's 5 in the morning and I woke up and I pieced all of this together in my head. So my throat is really dry because I haven't had any water since I went to bed. So story. You could tell yourself a sad story from a victim position. Let's say your character is playing a victim. And you take everything that has happened to you that is potentially like negative and you blame everybody else. Let's say, for example, I was born in the wrong country. The government is oppressive and horrible, and because of the government, I cannot succeed. My family is terrible, and because of them, I am the way that I am, or, I just cannot make it in life. Everything can become an excuse for you to not be able to make it in life. Your spouse, your children, you got divorced, and your ex-spouse is horrible. And from the victim's perspective, the story is always very sad. It's always somebody else's fault. And it's always us that something is preventing us from making it. But if we follow the scale of consciousness, if we go a step up, we get angry about all our circumstances, which is great because anger is a very strong emotion, and if catalyzed correctly, not to leash out on the people that are seemingly standing in our way or situations. Think wars. If we move from anger into courage, then we can own some of our own shortcomings that contributed to us being stuck in the victim position and feel powerless. And through owning them and admitting and seeing the truth, we can gain our power back and see, okay, where have I given my power away? why did I decide that this person, thing, situation has power over me when I have power over it in the sense that it's happening anyway, but I can choose how to react to it. And this is what Viktor Frankl described in Man's Search for Meaning. The people that made it through the Holocaust were the people that had an empowering story that they believed in. And no matter what was happening to them and how terrible it was, they had this will to live because they wanted to tell that empowering story, and they were telling it to themselves the whole time. And courage means taking responsibility. So from courage, we can move into love. And then love, just like anger, is a very powerful emotion that can help us materialize those empowering new stories and turn them into reality. Are you following? So what happens is that many of us are stuck in victim or war stories. And we can see it all over in the world. There are the perpetrators and the victims in every situation, starting from the family, which the family unit is a fractal for, like society, because everything is contained in everything else. So when in the family unit we have those power dynamics, the perpetrator and the victim, and people who allow unconsciousness to dictate the situation, then we see it in the town and the state at large, and the country and the world. But when we start to take responsibility and bring more presence and awareness to our relationships with the people in our home, with our friends, then instead of trying to control and dominate, or feeling like we're controlled and dominated, we can shift from those victim and perpetrator roles and own our own unconscious elements. And see that nobody's stopping us, but there's something inside of ourselves, like a limiting belief, a story that no longer serves us, which is preventing us from growth. And we can use life as a canvas on which we grow and develop our character consciously. Instead of living vicariously through characters in books, the screen, or video games. And you can see how those develop with imagination. In books, we need to actively use our own imagination to imagine the story and the characters, which is developing a faculty. In movies, somebody else has already done that for us and has interpreted the larger story, picked out portions of it that they want to tell us, put it into a screenplay, did the casting, casted the characters, produced the whole movie, again, picked scenes that they want to include and not, and then presented us with a finished product where we just passively sit and receive. So there isn't that much of an active part on our part, except the fact to choose what kind of movie to watch. In video games, we have a little bit more of an active element again, because we have the framework of the game, But then our character needs to perform and make choices. So if we take all the positive aspects of all three and do not use them as an escape from the world that we live in and physical bodies, and don't just, like interpret them in our minds, but decide to put them to work in our lives, we can take inspiration from all three, and also learn skills. See how this character handled something difficult, and also how it could be positive or negative way. Like, oh, I like the way this character handled it, or oh, that was very mature. I would rather handle this better. So basically, we're using the principle of take what resonates, discard the rest, and then a step that's lacking a lot is put it into action. Instead of blindly following and accepting everything, use discernment, and then make sure that you act on it. And in this way, you can create your own empowering story and live it. And continuously develop your character. And surely there will be times when you fall and slip, when you don't act according to your values or don't know what your values are in a certain area, and you follow blindly somebody else's and then realize, wait a minute, those values are not my own. But this is precisely how we grow. There'll be areas that you're called to explore that you don't know anything about. And as you're exploring, you will go through the ups and downs. But again, this is how the character grows. And if you look at books, movies, and stories, video games more in the plot of them, and you extract the essential elements, you can see how your life is very much the same. And, something bad happens, but then something good happens, and things change all the time. Nothing is permanent. Everything is in flux. And you could be in the victim role for a little bit, but then you could say, okay, where am I giving my power away? What story am I buying into? And take your power back by placing the importance on your own character and thinking. And be courageous enough to follow through and defend your own principles. Live them and see if they work for you or not. And at the same time, sometimes when you're living some of your own principles and you meet a character that has their own principles, that maybe some of them work better for you, you can be courageous enough to drop some of your own principles that don't serve you and adopt new ones that seem to be working for that other character. And you can see how can potentially they work for you. It's really interesting when we look into the deeper meaning and move past the surface. A lot of the stories that people are living right now are on a surface level, and they're very divided. Let's say I'm a man and I should not have feelings, and in order to be a good man, I have to have status and money. Or I'm a woman, I cannot be assertive, and in order to get myself a good man, I need to be beautiful and agreeable. Those are very surface characters. Which, no offense, if somebody wants to live on the surface, more power to them. But there's so much more to being a man and a woman. And the deeper into that you go, you discover that it's actually two sides of the same coin. And you're both. And you can take all the good values of the masculine and the feminine and embody them. For this is who you are. And this is how you come into wholeness. And you see yourself as you are. And if you go even deeper, you realize that you're not that as well. And it just keeps getting more and more interesting It's your own personal quest of self-discovery and self-mastery and the embodiment of the enlightenment you've achieved. And your life could be the most epic story ever. I believe people are neurotic and they suffer and they have diseases because we are really not living up to our own potential. We're scratching the surface barely. And there's so much more to be uncovered, so much more energy to be released from the depths of ourselves. And when we are not releasing that energy, it's stagnant, it's dormant, and a lot of times it can explode out into the world in ways that don't serve us and destroy rather than create, because it's a powerful energy. It's, like the energy of creation. So if we work on working with it, we can achieve great things and have so much fun while doing it, and actually end up living a full, interesting life that resembles very much, and if not even competes with and surpasses some of the most epic stories we have seen on screen. But it requires self-reflection and realization that everything on the outside simply mirrors what goes on inside of you. And the villains are all parts of your psyche that materialize as people, circumstances, and situations. That's what I've been uncovering, and it's been pulling through me. I love to explore the world deeply.